Hola, hello. Okay, today is midday, and we had an issue because some delay starting this meeting because in Canada there has been time change precisely today. So there was a gap there that we didn't know where Michelle was, and now we are here, so we are ready to start our conversation. Welcome, Michelle. Thank you so much for accepting, to share this moment. We are very happy to also very grateful of your participation as a jury this year in the selection. It was a fantastic experience, and also a series of conversations. Yes, private that we enjoy so much. And then, yeah, it's always so nice, to have this way to look at artists' works, recent works, something that people submit and see what's going on. And you had mentioned that, this region, our region, South America, south of you, our continent with, we're not so connected. So, and there is a lot of activity, of course, from Mexico down and everything. So hopefully now, through this festival and the effort of inviting and having international jury, we, incentivize and get to know more of this region, at least, more connected in a way. We do have the language issues, of course. So some of the events of the festival, we have basically virtual conversations, and the festival is a virtual event as a whole. Some of them are conducted in Spanish and some in English. So today we are talking to you. You are in Montreal.
Yes.
Yes, and we are going to hear from you about VIVA Art Action. Our Festival in Montreal, which is biennial, isn't it? Does it take place every 2 years?
It has most of the time, but I'll explain a little bit.
Fantastic. I love that organicity, that is the organic aspect of the scheduling. The space here, I don't know, we will hear from you, but Peras de Olmos programming, except for this festival that now is established, and because it's virtual, we can do it, whatever is happening around and wherever we are to some extent. We can do it on the same spot, which is November from 2nd to 12th, sometimes to 13th. But the other live programming, which this year we just restarted, after pandemia, it's more organic. And sometimes it's like several things start, coming in, and we open the space for that, and sometimes it gets a little calm. So it's really, it's a homey thing. Fantastic.
And alive in that way, right? So I'll talk a little bit about this idea of how to be a programming platform that is itself alive, to be in solidarity with the practices we're supporting. Some of that liveliness is to not be too rigid and to maintain a bit of flexibility.
So. Yes. Excellent. I will read a bit about your bio and a little description that you sent us about the festival, and then we will start talking. So Michel Lacombe lives and works in, of course, I'm not going to be able to pronounce the way it should be.
I can help you. It's pronounced Jojage. So the K's are pronounced kind of like J's. This is the Mohawk language, which was one of the local indigenous languages, yes. Not the only one, but one of them, and it's pronounced Jojage.
Jojage.
Yeah,
oh, fantastic. Jojage, Montreal in Canada. Fantastic. And I love this exercise that you artists in Canada do to mention and honor the land and the indigenous nations. Every time you are going to talk about yourselves, that is fantastic. We should start, I like that a lot, among other things that I sensed when I visited Toronto. In, I think it was 2014. And one of those things you will have the opportunity to tell us, which has to do with this artist-centered centers, art centers, artist-run art centers. It's really fascinating. So you grew up in Montreal, and you had obtained a BFA from Concordia University in 2006, and developed a rigorous body-based practice that generally takes the form of either short-duration performance art actions or long-term research-based projects rooted in conceptual embodiment and corporeal transformation. Your work has been shown in Canada, USA, Mexico, Argentina, here, and Europe, of course, in the context of performance event exhibitions and public interventions. Your artistic practice is paralleled by the commitment to supporting independent, live, and undisciplined forms of art making. You have worked in Montreal artist-run centers for over 15 years, and since 2011, same year we started here with the space.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
nice
amazing.
Echo.
Yes, you are the director since that year. VIVA Art Action, an international performance art festival. Yeah, fantastic. And that festival was initiated by Patrick Lacasse and Alexis Belavance. VIVA was founded in 2006 by 6 artist-run centers in the Greater Montreal area to support the production of events dedicated to the preservation and advancement of action art practices and knowledge. Having just celebrated the 8th edition?
Yeah.
Wow. In September, right?
Yeah.
In the month of September.
Recently.
Yeah. VIVA Art Action is an event of unbridled conviviality that gives artists the opportunity to meet and exchange and invites the public to encounter action art in its most striking, lively, and avant-garde forms. I like very much the pronouncement every time I see avant-garde or experimental as part of enunciations, because you know, in the art history considerations, it kind of seemed like there were other decades that were more exciting than these times, and you know, it's good to, like, you know, re-embody or keep that spirit. So
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I don't know about in Argentina, but for sure in Canada and in North America, regardless of the fact that we have public funding, there is a growing pressure for practices to be more economically viable and therefore a little bit more capitalist, neoliberal, following these kind of more artist entrepreneurial formats. And so I think for us, this positionality of experimentation, risk taking, which we're sort of putting under the umbrella of avant-garde, but it is about encouraging this idea of also not always being excellent and giving us the chance and opportunity to try. So yeah. I have some images. Thanks for the introduction, Graciela. Can I do a share screen and just have them
absolutely
all sort of in the background? Is it possible with the format to have the images while we still see me talking, or?
I think so. Yeah, okay. I think so.
I'll go and share screen. Desktop share. The PowerPoint is here. Okay. Do 4 seconds, and if it gets annoying, we'll do something else.
No, don't worry. Just take the time.
So apply to all, and then let's see if this is going to work. So slideshow.
Yeah.
And then great. And then we'll see if it doesn't change. Oh yeah, great. It's changing. So it's just going to be a bit of like a visual distraction. And what I've done is I've just put I've selected about 20 images per edition. So there's 8 editions, like you said. So I'll begin just with like a little bit of introduction. So you gave one already, Graciela, so thank you. So like I said, VIVA was founded in 2006. It's actually important to note that as part of its founding, the first edition was never meant to be a repeating event. It was supposed to be a one-of event. So you can kind of see in the quality of the images too, you know, like the archiving wasn't so great at the beginning, but we're getting slowly better at it. And the very first edition was a bunch of artist-run centers in Montreal, and artist-run centers in Canada are non-commercial gallery spaces that are community-driven or membership-run, which means that artists in the community can get involved, and they are the ones who are selecting the artists, developing the programming, and so they tend to try to be a little bit more, well, they are much more democratic in terms of their operations, and as such tend to historically and contemporarily be positioned a little bit as a dialogue with the more major institutions like museums and commercial galleries. And some of these spaces are dedicated to the production of artworks, and other ones are dedicated to, I think, the more like showing of artworks. So they kind of create an ecosystem that can support artists in parallel to the sort of more dominant structures, which is nice. The first edition of VIVA was also an opportunity to host the So To Do Congress. So I don't know if you know, I don't know his last name, I haven't found it, but Theodore something. Who is an international artist who ran a Congress of performance art that would travel the world and go to different cities. And so the first edition of VIVA, part of the chaos of it is it integrated the So To Do Congress. So VIVA had its own programming and structure, and then within that, there was this other performance event that had, so there was unknown amount of artists, unknown scheduling. So there was sometimes you'd show up and something would be happening as part of the Congress that nobody knew. So it was very much a space of discovery and experimentation. And so that's one thing we've tried to sort of maintain throughout the years. The Congress, again, was not a format. I don't know what happened with that. It wasn't an affiliation with VIVA, but I think after the first edition, people had such a positive experience that they decided that they wanted to do it again. It took us a few years to get the second one going. So the second one was in 2009. And so like you said in the bio, since then we've had 8 editions. So there was 2006, the first year, 2009, 2011, 13, 15, 17, 19, and then a 4-year break during the pandemic, because we also chose to not actually do anything during the pandemic and just take a bit of a breather. And then we just came back in 2023 with the 8th edition. So we can talk about pacing a little bit later also. So the festival, the other thing that's important to know is there's these kind of core values, and they're put in practice in different ways. So First, I'll talk a little bit about the programming. And to talk about the programming, it's also maybe important to know that VIVA is nomadic and that we do not have a space. So VIVA is sort of like performance art, something that emerges in the landscape and then disappears. And as such, we don't have offices, we don't have a permanent space. And so the festival's form and location has often changed depending on if we have partners, what kind of spaces in the city are available. The first 4 years, so from 2006 to 2013, we were in a space which we're seeing in the images right now called Le Bain Saint-Michel. And this was an abandoned public pool that the city used to rent.
I love that space.
It's so great. And
We
it's
don't
perfect.
have it anymore.
So it's actually been in renovations for decades now. So since 2013, the city closed it to renovate, and it is still not open. So we have no idea what's happened with the space, but it was a gift. There was all sorts of experimental programming that happened there, not just in performance, but dance, even just community organizing. And because the city would rent it for $1, Graciela. So nothing. So it was just like a kind of symbolic transaction. So we were there for the first number of years, and it was great because we could hose down after the performances. As you see in some of the images, the performances happen in what we call the headquarters, which is the main space. So in this case, it's the pool, but it also expands outwards. And sometimes when it expands outwards, that can involve public space, that can involve in situ or site-specific spaces. So one edition, we had an artist do a performance in a public swimming pool, which actually had water in it. We've also had performances in relation to certain buildings or architectures. We had another edition, an artist wanted to perform in her own house. And so the public one at a time was invited into her own house. And so the headquarters is kind of a gathering space, but then the performances kind of expand. And in the first years, that also included the gallery spaces of our partnering organizations. But we've stopped that. And one of the reasons we've stopped that is because we want to be able to offer something to artists that they don't otherwise have. And these spaces already exist. And a lot of these spaces come with constraints. So in galleries in Canada, you don't touch the walls. In dance spaces, you don't touch the floor. In theater spaces, you don't touch the curtains. And so we've really tried to, when we pick a location for our headquarters, privilege a space that allows artists to maybe work in a way that some of these other spaces do not allow. So something that's messier, something that's unpredictable, something that maybe has materials that are more toxic or dangerous. Or also just different relationships with the audience. So works that can move in and out of the space, etc. So we were in the pool for the first couple of years. In 2015, we changed to the space we're seeing now in the slideshow, which is a metal workshop. They used to repair trains, but now there's an artist who does monumental sculpture. It's called Les Ateliers Jean Briand, so the artist is Jean Briand. And we would take over his workshop. So we did that between 2015 and 2019. And then the pandemic hit. And then with the return now, this year for 2023, we were in a new space, which is a kind of cultural space that you'll see in the images a bit later. So again, what's important for us when we're looking for a location is as little constraints as possible, as much autonomy as possible, because we will occupy the space. The public programming usually lasts about a week, so 4 to 5 days. But then the festival also begins with 2 what we call laboratory days, and that's been an initiative that's been in place since 2013. And that means we bring the artists ahead of time so that they can meet each other, they can work in the space, they can find other sites. Some artists develop their whole work during those 2 days. Some artists come with an idea and totally change it. Some artists don't. Some artists come and use those 2 days to sleep in, do some tourism. But it's really important for us because one of the, I think, values of the festival is also this idea of exchange and encounter. We really feel strongly that to have impacts in our programming, we don't actually need to do anything except for bring interesting and engaged artists together, and that as a consequence, they will generate other opportunities. But for that, they need the time and opportunity. So we have a lot of decision-making, and I'll talk about conditions later, that really are about privileging this possibility for encounter and for network building and for exchanging also after we do our performances with our peers.
Fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's so important. So That's in terms of site. The way the programming itself is built is quite different from edition to edition, so it's very lively. The first number of years, actually, all of the programming was done by the partnering centers, and they would actually make a selection of artists and then bring it together. So the first few years of my job, it was really just about facilitating that collaboration. So I would do communications, a bit of coordination, but we would not touch the programming. And then progressively, partnering centers started to support a little less programming. And this actually in Canada, we have public funding, which is a beautiful gift and something we should very consistently fight to protect and preserve and defend.
Yeah.
But it also means that with that public funding, sometimes there's a kind of like dependency that happens, and we lose a certain capacity to be reactive or more autonomous or spontaneous. So the funding system shifted. We were in times of austerity with the Canadian government. This was maybe around 2015. And a lot of the opportunities that allowed our partnering centers to bring in international artists stopped being available. And so VIVA itself slowly started to invite artists ourselves. And at first, this was mostly to balance the other programming. And then progressively, as funding situations shifted, we took more and more responsibility. Until the pandemic. Now this year is the first year where we've done the whole programming ourselves. That being said, this idea of decentering is very important to us. And so even though we've done the programming ourselves, we've honored this sort of tradition that used to be at the heart of the festival. And so what we do when we've done our programming more recently is we work what I call the artist bank. And so we have a very long list of artists whose work we've encountered through traveling, through the festival, through other festivals, through just them emailing us. And when it comes time to do the programming, we're very proactive. So I'll write to past artists, I'll write to other festivals, and I'll say, who do you want to see at Viva? Who do you think would find this opportunity interesting and relevant? So this year we ended up with a kind of long list of about 150 different names. And then from that, we try to weave a programming together that is representative. And what I mean by representative is we are trying not to say what performance art is or action art is. That being said, we do have an educational role in our community, especially as other live art practices are more visible and take more space. But we also want to honor that it is a discipline that is undisciplined and has many different vocabularies and approaches. So we try to have some artistic diversity, and that would just be, for example, in terms of how the performances unfold. So we try to have long duration works, shorter duration works, works in public space, works that intervene in public space. We also have a practice in Quebec called like furtive practice. And so these are artworks that happen in public space, but invisibly. So the audience is not necessarily aware that what they're seeing is a performance. We have relational projects, so projects that unfold one-on-one with the audience. We have performance, like kind of embodiments where people just are like kind of persona throughout the festival. So it's very mixed in terms of texture. And one of the things that texture provides is to look at different modes of encountering and engaging with art. So most people here are used to this idea of the show. So you show up, you sit down, something happens and you leave. And while that is part of our programming, we really try to also include other types of encounters. So you might see an artwork and not know it's happening. You might have to activate the artwork yourself. And this for us is very important to also encourage the public and audience to not be passive, but to be develop a kind of curiosity to be a bit more engaged in the artwork. So we've been programming that kind of diversity. We also privilege, of course, cultural and national diversity. So people from different continents, different regions. We cannot afford to bring everyone from everywhere. So what we try to do is do an edition, and then we'll kind of look back and see like, who did we miss? What spaces have we not seen? What countries or regions have we kind of lost contact with? And then we'll try to privilege those the next time. So there's a kind of rotation. It's also really important for us to mix local, national, and international artists because for us, part of network building is not just looking at the international, but putting the international in dialogue with local practices. I think it helps.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it helps us also understand our own cultural kind of habits and practices that we can become invisible to us. And then the other kind of diversity, which I want to talk about, which is really important, is also intergenerationality. So we really make an effort in our programming to have younger artists. Of course, most of the artists that are showing have already a practice and a vocabulary. So we do not support artists who are still, well, they could be a student, but who are very young in their practice. But we support local initiatives that do support those kind of practices. So we're sensitive to a kind of ecosystem. But at the festival, the practice is good. A little bit more. Just like they have their own vocabulary.
They are.
And then also, like I said, so that mid-career and then also senior artists. So it's really important for us to try to create a space that's welcoming for these intergenerational dialogues, because we really believe in the importance of transmission, and that so much of the knowledge, and so much of the knowledge and experience of performance art cannot be taught in classes, but is really dependent on this like oral passage from person to person. So that's been really fun. So in terms of programming, that's kind of how we do it. And that's how we end up with the artists. In terms of funding or how we, well, actually, no, I'll stick with programming a little bit. So that's kind of how we select our artists, although that changes too. So sometimes we've put calls, sometimes we put calls out just for certain parts of it. We try to, I guess like Graciela, not be stuck in a way of doing things so that the way we're working can shift and respond to allow for different sort of possibilities, and also for us to keep it interesting, because if you're just doing the same thing the same way all the time, it becomes a bit automatic, like automatic movement. And we like to keep things a little bit more lively. Some additions, we've also had conferences, workshops, more sort of structured moments for sharing an encounter. I'll admit that this year we cut all of that out. And that was because we wanted to privilege these more informal modes of encounter and exchange that we felt were less recognized by our funders. And so we really this year adamantly recognized that this kind of like social space that surrounds the programming is actually itself as valuable of a skill share as a conference or a professional workshop. It also allowed us to just concentrate on the art, because if not, it's just so chaotic. It's just a lot of different mind spaces. And then the other thing we integrate is in regards to like archives. So we really think about how to well, not in the first years, as you saw, but progressively over the years, thinking about how to hold the memory of the festival. And so for sure, there's like more traditional documentation methods like photography we're seeing here, some video, although very rarely. This is the first year we've done a complete video documentation because it's just so expensive. But we also have writers. So ever since, I think, 2011, we've had different forms of writing attached to the festival, and those writers are part of the programming. So like all the artists, they're invited, they come with us, they stay with us the whole week, they're part of the laboratory period, and they're invited as witnesses. And as witnesses, they're then invited to share their experience as a support to the visual documentation, and as a way of also maybe translating or sharing the non-visual aspects of the work in the festival. The image totally captures things like the composition, the colors, the materials. But what about like, you know, the energy in the room, the pacing, the crowd's attention, you know, all these kind of things. So the blogs have also changed in format over the years, like everything else at Viva. Some years have been more, I would say, like traditional critical writing, like art review on a daily basis. Then it is sort of expanded. We had some years where we had poets. We had one year we had someone who wrote haikus with members of the audience that reflected on the performances. We had someone one year who only did animated GIFs instead of even writing, made like sort of more visual mashup things. So we've been really playful. And then this year, what we actually did was structured a little bit more. And so we had 2 writers in residence, and we picked someone who has experience in more like historical writing and someone who's a poet. And they've both were with us for the whole festival. And they were given, instead of having to write throughout the festival, which is also a different kind of reflection, they wrote for themselves during the festival, and some of that was shared in the communication tools. But now they were given 2 months to then sort of digest a little bit what happened, because there's always sort of 2 temporalities in performance, I find.
Absolutely.
What you encounter first, and then you sort of digest, and other things kind of bubble up. So with that in mind, they were given 2 months, and we've partnered with a sort of local art magazine here, and they will actually do an insert in the magazine. So we're going to parasite it a little bit with both visual and these kind of textual documentations, with something that's more theoretical or historical, and then something that's more poetic. And so we're really excited about this. So again, everything in the festival is kind of like a terrain for experimentation, for trying new things, and also to try to let the tools of the festival and the participants be as creative as possible. So it's worth noting that although VIVA is a festival that's a structure with performances in it, the way we try, or I try to organize it, is as a happening. And so from the day the artists show up, or even before, until the end of the festival, I try to engage with everything as art. So even when the people are mopping the floor between performances, this is art. And it's important because I feel it gives us a space of allyship and solidarity with the practices. And if we're able to take more risks, then I feel the artists feel supported also in taking more risks. Another example is maybe the graphic design. So I don't know if you saw, but in the slideshow,
yes, I noticed.
Number of different logos.
Quite interesting, yes.
And it's because each year we also use it as an opportunity to reimagine the whole identity of the festival. So the graphic designers we hire are also given carte blanche to make an art project out of it if they want to. Most of the websites have hidden art aspects. So a thing, if you click on, something will happen. So we really try to think of everything as creatively,
as a creative opportunity.
And as performatively as possible. So also encouraging graphic designers to think about, like, well, what does performance permit that you can't do in your regular work, and how can we try to work with that? So this year's website was like a hotline that you can call. There's also a phone number attached. So
that's amazing.
Just trying to be sort of playful a little bit. You'll also see a lot of photos in regards to programming about kitchens, people eating. One of the core aspects of VIVA, or our defining characteristics of the festival since the beginning, is there's a community kitchen at the heart of the festival. This initiative started in the early editions with an artist named SP38, and it was primarily functional, I would say. We realized that during a festival, people do not eat well. We don't take care of ourselves. And so the kitchen was a tool to just make sure artists, staff, everyone could just eat. And then what happened, like in any festival, the artists started to show up in the kitchen and progressively take more and more space. The very first edition, this happened actually with Non Grata, who's a Estonian collective who's quite well known in the performance art community. And they literally just like took over. So I think after that, we recognized the potential of this platform as an artistic platform and not just as a kitchen. And so since 2013, the kitchen has hosted an artist in residence also, for whom cooking food, sharing food, or working with food is an integral part of their practice. And they are given the time and the resources. So we hire staff to help prep the food with them. And they are given the opportunity to make an artwork out of the meals. That can be, some artists do it in how the meal is served. Some artists have done it in how the meal is cooked. Some artists have, it's really been quite different. Some artists just do a kind of like more traditional kitchen, and then at the end do a performance. So it's quite open, but the idea again is to just think of these kind of structures that offer a service or that do something also as potential spaces for artistic and performative infiltration. So that's really great. We also find that the public is so much more generous and receptive after they've eaten. And it really,
Yeah,
like
sure,
everybody.
that's very good. Yeah.
So it really helps set the tone because Viva, in the kind of pedagogical or educational role we're playing in our community, is also about, I think, encouraging audiences to loosen up some of the protocols that the more structured art spaces or live art spaces will create. And the kitchen does that because it's already, you start off with an artwork you're eating, that you're encountering. And then the other thing the kitchen does is it allows us to keep the festival free. So since the very beginning, and this is to sort of honor the artist-run center culture that was at the heart of the festival, none of the programming is paid. It's all free. That's also some of the reasons we stopped the workshops, because the partners for the workshops wanted to charge for them and we refuse. And the reason is we want people to open themselves up and come and discover the practice. Whether you like it or not, does not matter, but we want people to give themselves the chance to experience it. And my experience is that when people have to pay tickets, they go see what they know or what they like. And so they lose this sense of discovery. And so the kitchen is pay what you can. People volunteer whatever money they want for it. And it's been a way for us to make money, because when we get public funds in Canada, we also, capitalism, need to show that we make money. And so the kitchen has been a really great service for that too, because it's a transaction economically that people are used to doing. People are used to paying for food. The meals are also, like I said, sliding scale, always under $10, so very affordable. And people don't have to eat with us, so they can bring their own lunch if they want. Because it's also an art project. It's not a restaurant. So you might come and have a meal you enjoy. You might come and have a meal you don't enjoy. You might come and have an experience with the meal that you're not comfortable with. And that's okay, because it's an artwork and not a restaurant. But it's been this nice way to kind of like meet certain criteria of eligibility around public funding, while I think honoring the kind of values that are true to us and our practice. So in terms of programming, I think that more or less covers it. What I maybe want to talk about is conditions, because it's very important. And I know that Canada is in a very privileged position internationally. We have, like I said, access to public funding. And even within that, performance art is a very tiny player in the world of money. So other sectors, dance, theater, huge amounts of funding, visual arts a little bit less, than performance even less. And so Viva, within that, does a lot of work to try to increase and improve the conditions of artists. In the context of our festival, the way we do that is very literal. So we pay for everything. We do not want artists to have to pay out of their pockets to be artists, because then only rich artists get to circulate. So we give them an artist fee to perform. We pay for their travel, and we offer accommodations for the duration of the whole festival. The kitchen feeds them for the duration of the festival. So we have structured meals at night with the public, but during the day, there's food available for artists and workers. And we also give artists carte blanche. So that means white card. I don't know where that comes from in French, but it means that we do not do any curating. So we do not, we invite artists and not artworks. So we usually will bring in people whose practices we are interested in, we want to see, we're curious about. Also, we tend to privilege practices that we feel would be hard to fit in other contexts, because either they're too messy, they're too unpredictable, they're too long, they're too short, they're too invisible, they're too visible. Within that, by privileging those kind of practices, I think trying to make space for works that maybe we feel are undervalued or under-recognized in our community.
Right. So Michelle,
yeah.
let me ask you, so artists are not asked to send their description of what they're going to do and all that? That is so like,
Yes. So, and it's really interesting, because in terms of process, like some artists, they know exactly what they're going to do, and that's fine.
That's fine.
That's the dominant way of working in Canada. And we want to also give space for people who work more reactively or spontaneously or intuitively. And like I said, also because so many artworks or artists we work with have this idea of like context and site specificity, it's hard
Yes.
to imagine. So we just
Right.
invite artists open-ended. And then as we know what the
Fantastic.
festival is going to start to look like, because we don't even necessarily know where we're going to be, we open that conversation with the artist and then we say, this is what the space is. This is how long it's going to be. What do you want to do? And then the festival, we try to adapt. So if someone says, I want to do a 5-day performance, well, that's my job then to try to make that fit in the schedule. Or if someone says, actually, I don't even want to be here. I want to be, you know, in this other space next Tuesday, then that's my job to try to kind of accommodate that. So we really try to, instead of asking artists to fit into the structure, let artists kind of come up with what they want to do or what feels urgent or important for them at that moment. And then we adapt. So that means the schedule often changes. That's okay because it's alive. Related to scheduling changes, we also have progressively, as we've gotten a little bit more established in our local community, playing more of a role of like advocacy or activism. And so we've done a lot of work with the structures that establish the payment fees to pressure performance art fees to get increased. The other thing we've done is really tried to do a lot of work around making visible the politics of international travel. So there is this responsibility, I think, as an international festival to recognize that international travel is in some ways policed by national laws, regulations, and borders. And as such, not everyone gets to travel in the same way. And so we have taken a position since 2000. I don't remember if it's 11 or 13. We had an artist invited and her visa was refused. And we made the decision to not replace her in the programming and to actually recognize that refusal. So it was up to the artist how she wanted to manage it. She decided to give a talk about it and not perform at a distance. But what we did is instead of the documentation of the performance, we circulated the refusal letter from the visa department. And so it's very important for us to make visible, again, what kind of bodies and what kind of practices get to circulate. We also now pay for all of the expenses regarding visas. So if people have to apply, we take that responsibility in our budgets because we recognize that some of those processes can be very expensive. And so we really try to, as much as possible, accommodate the participation of practices we like, regardless of how difficult they are. We don't always succeed because these are big systemic things, but we feel it's important because it's also just a way of, again, I think making visible these kind of politics, because if not, people tend to think that the work they see from international artists is, you know, maybe the best work possible. But it's important for us to say, well, maybe that is the best work possible of what can come to Canada and what you can see. So what are the artists that are not allowed to circulate or don't have the capacity financially to pay for that process? This year, we also invited an artist with a disability. So again, this idea of who gets to move around and share their work. And so that's something I think we're quite proud of, is this role too of trying to, a little bit more of like activism or a kind of political positioning in this. The festival over the years has grown. The first couple of years, it was wonderful to look at the archives. Yeah.
To turn up the volume. I'm not listening.
Is it okay, Graciela? Yeah. We had a little nache boom boom infiltration. So, is it good?
Now it's okay. Now it's okay.
Related to that, I guess also like this idea of like advocacy, education, and disturbance, I guess, is it's important to say that when we do works in public space, we don't necessarily ask for permission. So in Canada, you sometimes have to ask for permission if you want to do things. And again, like we leave that up to the artist. So we'll have a conversation about what are the risks if you intervene in public space, what are the kind of things that can happen. But I would say most of the time, like 99% of the time, we really choose to go without permits, because I think this idea of choosing to encounter the public directly sometimes is more successful as an artistic gesture when it doesn't go through the protocols of like permits and all that kind of stuff. And again, that's our job too then to sort of work with the artist to see what they're comfortable with in terms of intervention. So the artists in terms of their conditions. We talked about being allowed to the sort of like artistic self-determinacy and artistic agency. We talked about some economic or political aspects to that. We really try to, we will not stop a performance ever. So we really let the works take the time they take. And for that, what we've done is, again, try to encourage like casual, welcoming spaces. We also don't know what artists are doing. And sometimes as the scale of the public has increased, so the first editions, you'll see in the photos, much smaller crowds. And that was really the performance art community. But over the years, Viva has been able to really cultivate public and an audience that is ridiculously large. Some of our events have up to 350 people an evening, which is at the max capacity of what we can handle. Yeah, we thought we were
amazing.
We were kind of hoping to have less people this year, but it was just as packed, which is great. But I was like, oh, so many people. And we have now what are called like a garde du senti in French. So these are like active listeners. So what we do now is, because so much of the audience, it's their first time ever witnessing performance. And we know that the works can sometimes be uncomfortable, and because we don't want to censor the works, during the festival since 2019, so the past 2 editions, we hire active listeners to be on site. And so these are people that if someone in the audience is feeling disturbed or uncomfortable or doesn't like what they see, they can go talk to these people who will hold space, talk with them about it, etc. And this has been a nice way of, I think, allowing us to maintain more freedom for the artists, while also recognizing that for a public who might never have seen performance, some of the things might be uncomfortable, especially because we don't give much context. We don't tell the audience where to sit or stand. We don't tell them what's going to happen. We do a little introduction at the beginning, but really it's a space of direct encounter between the audience and the artist. And some people find that very provoking. And in some ways also the active listeners help the artists too, because many artists, it's come to our attention, are not used to working with such large crowds, and also with crowds who are maybe not so familiar with performance. And so sometimes the artists themselves, after doing the work, feel many emotions and difficulties, and having people there to help talk about that and process it has proven to be useful in the past 2 years. So again, we try to have this kind of like environment or ecosystem that really kind of keeps going back to risk-taking and encountering or encouraging people to be curious and open, but also sometimes to be uncomfortable, recognizing that that's a very big part of performance art. So we've talked a little bit about programming, artists, conditions. I think maybe what I can, well, and then if we have questions, we can talk about questions too. But one of the things I think that's important to also address is sort of like growth, organizational growth. So there's a lot of pressure in sort of neoliberal context to get bigger, better, blah, blah, blah. More money, bigger, whatever. So a big part of my job since I was at Viva in 2011 was, I think, to honor the original values at the core of the festival. And that means resisting a certain efficiency. And that also means resisting a certain growth. So our public has gotten bigger. Our funding has not always gotten bigger with it, but that's okay. But when I say we're keeping growth, it's because there's a lot of pressure here to, if you want to get more money, you have to do more things. That's the way it works. And I think that over the years, we've done a few off projects where we've sort of like either occupied a public space or done a programming for someone who's invited us. We also did a circulation once, which lets artists sort of develop a performance over 6 months in different cities and then present it at Viva. So we try different sort of strategies, but I think it's important for us to say that we are not in the intention of doing more and more and more. I think we like the rhythm of something slow. It's important for us to do the festival when it feels right, necessary, and possible. So during the pandemic, we took this position that although we had a biannual rhythm before, it will now be a whatever annual. So when it's possible is when we will do it. But again, respecting this time sort of like a performance, we'll have like the pre-performance, the action, and then the post-performance, like to honor that cycle too. So there's all the preparation, there's the festival, but then also very much important, this post-festival moment where we digest what happened, we reflect with the artists, we reflect with the audience, and that's a process of different kind of meetings and encounters and discussions that will last about, not consistently, but about 6 months. We'll sort of gather information. And then from that, we'll decide, okay, what do we do next and how do we do it? And so what we've done in the interim, like I said, is because the festival has gotten bigger, has been able to less efficiently support younger local practices. We've now decided to try to support them through supporting other initiatives. So members now at VIVA can apply to get small amounts of money to do their own events. There's a student festival here that we've been helping to promote the activities and encouraging people to go. And we're looking at developing like a mentorship program with this other sort of emerging artist program. So it's really about maybe also thinking through this idea of ecosystem and community and not feeling like we need to do everything, but looking at what's there and how we can support that to enable a practice or different types of practices to thrive outside of the festival too, without us also being like, Viva, 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 like it's not the intention. I think we're really more focused on the artists. And then who knows what comes next. So, in some of the images, especially when we were in the pool, there was some additions where we tried this structure called tableau noir, is like a blackboard where anyone from the audience could just write their names and do a performance. That lasted about 2 years. It was wonderful, actually. People were so generous and kind, and we were worried people would come and like really fuck things up, kind of. But in the end, not at all. And it actually made some really beautiful performance moments, some of which are in the slideshow. So, it's also like this idea of in growth and in repetition, how do we stay alive, and how do we create a space where, like the artists, we don't know what's going to happen. And I think that for me, this is a very important quality of the festival, because when the work happens, we are in a shared space of witnessing, because the artists, the staff, and the audience are all discovering the work in real time at the same time. And this is something that's become so precious to me, because I worked in these artist-run centers for a long time and in galleries. And it's great to get to see all the behind the scenes and know how things work in detail. But there's also a magic, I think, about holding this collective space of not knowing. And I think it really helps to cultivate trust. And for us, the festival is very much rooted in these ideas of trust. Trust the audience, trust the artists, trust each other. And every year there's a moment. So for sure this year too, there was a moment. It was with Camille's performance. And Camille works with a care worker who's his assistant. And this year it was V who did it. And she left the space, and the technicians looked at me and they're like, where is she going? And I said, we're going to just wait and see, And so these moments, though, I feel can be felt in the space, like we're discovering it together, we're witnessing it together. And I think for the artists, it also allows them to have control during the action, that if they want to pivot, if something happens and they say, now the work is going to be this, there's space and time for that. Because again, it's very hard as the festival has gotten a bigger reputation, and now people come from out of town to see it, and it's really wonderful, but it creates pressure on the artists. And so we really try actively to counteract that pressure with a space of collective unknowing and collective discovery. And that's been, I think, very important for us, and very important, I think, for the artists too. So it was a great year. We're hoping to do another one, hopefully in 2015. We're just kind of wrapping up. But it's been nice. And it's been nice too to see, I think, how Montreal has a lot of live art, a lot of dance, a lot of theater. And I think it's been really nice over the years to see how the festival itself has become this kind of oasis for a lot of artists who don't identify with these more dominant spaces, to be able to go and see themselves in a kind of art making and art sharing that maybe feels more authentic, more alive, and hopefully how that can help also encourage the presence of more autonomous art events. So, you know, again, like this idea of the idea of VIVA is also to somewhat inspire other people to then do other events and to encourage younger artists to self-organize and to, again, not always be in this posture that performance needs to be in a museum or performance needs to be in a gallery, but that performance can be everywhere. And what's important is actually that it is everywhere. So it's been nice to see over the years how we've been able to do that. And now also we were always kind of these like peripheral kind of like bad boy kind of people breaking the rules and stuff. And, you know, we do some well, I shouldn't say this, but you know, some things are on the like fringe of legality sometimes. But this is important for us, again, with this idea of like shared risk taking. But I think it's been good. And over the years, I think we've built the trust also of our funders and of our councils. And so I've been invited recently to be on consultation committees. And so I think VIVA has also, I would hope, make visible the importance of peripheral art, and peripheral art that isn't at the periphery, again, because it cannot make it to the center, but peripheral art that is on the periphery because it believes that the periphery is a meaningful and valuable place to be making and sharing work. And I think if I can do anything, it's to support that. So, yeah.
Wow, that is so great. It's a fantastic, very complete and fast-paced presentation.
Yes, I talk fast, Graciela.
You do. I remember, yes.
Maybe on the video archive, you can slow down 25%. And I can talk in like a deep, low.
No, it's really amazing. And, you know, all the values that are preserved. So, for instance, I mean, one of the things that you mentioned about the active listeners, that's something that's been implemented this year. And in relation to considering that the crowd has gotten bigger, that is so interesting because, we're really used to like more intimate, right? Kind of, conviviality. And of course, the public spaces, I mean, is the open place, you know, it's open. So there is more sense of, you know, less pressure in a way. So to manage those very different moments and very different spaces, energy spaces, I imagine that you are definitely in close contact with the artist and the whole situation. So this is like being wired up all the time, and also probably having an amazing team that is able to respond. And is the team all composed of performance artists? Because I mean, it is a practice to know how to, you know, to observe and to you know, to accompany and help whatever, you know, and so that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a good question. The team is very punctual. It's not huge, but it builds up just before the festival. Outside of that, it's just me. And we do, Graciela, privilege the hiring of artists, and if possible, performance artists. We also do a lot of, let's say, with the production team, which was 2 women this year. And a guy, but it was like different type of production, general production. Anyways, but the artistic production was with 2 women primarily. And we talk a lot before, again, so the laboratory is interesting because it's not just for the artists, it's also for the staff to get used to the rhythm and everything. And we do talk a lot about this idea of like needs, and it's important for me too that the artists who have technical needs don't dominate artists who have less visible needs. So sometimes an artist just needs to sit silently in the space for a few hours. And often my experience has been that those kind of needs do not get prioritized over someone who needs to plug things or install a big thing. So it's been really important for us. And I think this is a sensitivity that artists have. And this is why it's important to hire artists. But also this is a big part of the conversation we have as a team is that it all is important. So if someone needs to have their hand held, that is a technical need, just like having a projector tested, or someone who needs help drawing things or on a thing or trying on a costume. Like these are all whatever the artist needs. And similar to that, I think artists are given a small budget for materials and we don't control that. So if your material, Graciela, is you need to go get a massage because your body hurts after your performance, that counts. If your material is you need new shoes because your shoes aren't good because you don't have much money and you need new shoes because you're going to walk during your performance, that counts. So we're not in a space of policing the needs, but rather trying to, again, remain adaptable. So yeah, that is important because I think artists tend to have that sensitivity, and it's because we had someone once who had more technical training and there was also a lot of things she refused to do because she found them dangerous or she found them and I was like, we also need to be able to be okay with breaking the rules a little bit because or supporting the artists in them breaking the rules, you know? Or taking risks a little bit. So constantly there is a big job of vigilance during the festival. And I think that's also why the scale of the audience is a bit challenging because with that many people, it's just hard to get close and move around very easily. So it's, I mean, it's a good problem, but I would say our number one problem is just the size of the
that people are being more interested and fascinated with this.
Yeah, but at the same time, we don't want to limit people because we think it's so beautiful that, and it is a context like, how do you create an intimate, connected, engaged space, but with 350 people? And I think that the success of the festival is that I think people feel like it's a small, like you feel like you're in a basement or a studio, even though there's 300 people. No one's on their phone, everyone's watching, people get close. So I think but that is the main challenge, like how to keep this intimacy despite the scale.
That is fantastic. And the team changes every year.
Every year.
Because they are paid. So of course, so the team to give the rotation to that.
We do also, like, we also have volunteers, but we try to give volunteers like social tasks, like bartending or things that are more like fun and playful, like social. And so the team is paid. I would love to work with the same people, but it's just, you know, to give someone a job.
Distribute the funds.
Well, also 2 weeks out of 2 years, like people have other jobs later, or people just don't have the availability. So hiring is actually a very big challenge for us. Especially as the festival's gotten bigger, because the workload, like the capacity of the people is harder, and it's a bigger team now because it's 3 people in production generally. Kitchen has also 3 people in production. Someone on communications, and then me. So I'm recurring, but we try to also hire people kind of when possible in the community or because artists need jobs too. So
sure. Yes. And there was something I was thinking, it just kind of went by, but
no, it's okay. But I think also, like, for us, this is again like the conditions, the paying of the staff. Like, this is also because, like, in Canada we have access to that funding. So I am very adamant that even a DIY or like a performance art festival should be able to give similar conditions to another more major institution, because it's not because we're in the streets or unpredictable that it doesn't deserve those funds. So I've done a lot of work over the years to put pressure to get that money to do that, because we have it in Canada. And I recognize that that's such a privilege, because we have artists, Graciela, who come here and they have like been practicing performance for like 15, 20 years, never gotten paid, but you know, we have this money in our country. And so it's like my job to let those people get a little bit of it, because the work is worth it and the work is important. And so Yeah. I do a lot of work of like détournement in French.
Yes.
Go somewhere
It's
else. And the active
amazing.
listeners is a good example of that. The city actually, one of the scale of the festival wants us to do mediation, wants us to like hold people's hands and explain what's happening. This is a criteria of funding. And so the active listeners is also a way of responding to that criteria, but under our own sort of parameters, you know, we do it ourselves, our own way. So with the public funding, I think it's also important to say that it comes with requirements
sure.
that try to extinguish the more exciting parts of the festival.
Yeah.
So we really try to
They try to control. I mean, it's all about,
exactly. And this is like you were saying previously, like well, not today, but previous day, like choosing to work outside of those systems sometimes gives more freedom. But over the years with Viva, I've tried to work in that system and carve out
that is
ways
fantastic.
to meet the needs, but through other ways, through our own ways. And hopefully this will also make them more flexible, like the councils and the funders more flexible with their requirements, because this control is very paternalizing and yeah.
So do you have to, I mean, I was thinking about the timing, you know, or different times preparing, you know, as when do you start projecting the festival? Next day one has finished, or no, you take some time. But when you, because somehow, you know, it seems like it's also very the connectivity is there all the time, like you know, sort of consulting or getting suggestions about artists from different other regions, and all these conversations I gather from what you told us. And from that time to, you know, you mentioned a list of 100 something artists first as potential invitees, and then coming up to the 20 that there were this year. What is the timing that you know, how that progressively all that information, you know, is being processed until it comes up to 20, and you have to be in good contact with them, and you know, because it is this atmosphere of trust, you know, to feel okay and to be mutually caring, obviously, you know, from the artists and from everything that the festival provides to the artists. So I was just trying to imagine those times, you know, since when, you know, how much time since, let's say, okay, you got your list, when you guys start making this list, and then, you know, I guess that starts somehow, you know, like reviewing work, reviewing names, people researching.
For what it's worth, the list is always active. I'm always adding names to it.
Sure, of course.
So we have the bank is a constant tool that's being active all the time. And I think it's an excellent question in terms of timeline. I also want to say before I answer that it's very important for me that I am also an artist. And so I do not work full-time on Viva. I work full-time during the festival, but part of the pacing that I will talk about is also because I want to be an artist, and I want the people in my community to be an artist. So it's important to work slowly so that we can also live practices. This year was a bit different because with the relaunch of the festival, we structured things slightly differently. But generally speaking, I would say it's about an active year. So usually about, well, if I use this year, for example, we will be sort of in digestion. Well, we'll use the metaphor of food. It's always nice.
Yeah.
We will digestion till the spring, probably. So we will digest the last edition until about January. Then the spring will be to kind of start to get hungry again for something else. And then in the summer is usually when we will start to more actively either put out a call or think about how we will do the programming. So
Right.
do we want to work with the bank? Do we want to do a call? And in that, do the steps for that. So prepare the call or start reaching out to feed the bank. We might actually do a call coming up because it's been so long, and with the pandemic, we're less connected with the international network and stuff. So I think maybe it might be time, but we'll see again. It depends. And then usually, and this is again structured by funding deadlines.
Yeah.
In September, a year before the festival, will be the first grant application to the Canada Council. The federal one. And by there, we need to just have an orientation. So about how many days, about how many artists. We usually, this last time we gave in French, we say pressenti. So artists we're looking at, but not necessarily confirmed, to give a sense. And then it kind of goes progressively from there. So we put in the grant, then we did the programming over, oh, the sun has come out, it's beautiful.
Oh, nice.
Beautiful,
yeah, I can see it in your face.
Blinding. We did the short list of artists, like from the 150 to 50 over about 4 months. So very slow.
Wow.
Also because not all the artists were available. We don't know if the artists even sometimes still have practices or can travel. So I usually reach out first, just interest. Would you be interested? Is this interesting? And then when sometimes ask them to give me tools so that I can apply for more funding. So in the winter, then so the following winter, this would be, let's say, in the future, winter 2024. I'm in grant writing.
Yeah.
This spring, we get
you do that. You do the grant writing.
All of it. Yeah, I do everything at VIVA.
Wow,
like
that's
budget,
amazing.
grant writing. Yeah. Well, not everything. I bring in friends, but everything. Yeah. And as of the spring, maybe up until when the festival happens, is when I would say we're in the time of cementing things. So I always call, like, in French, I have an expression called couler dans le jello, which means it's like set in jello. So I will confirm things-ish, like in jello, but they're always free to move around a little bit.
Right.
And then we start with the communication. So we ask artists to just give us like bios and very basic information, but nothing about what they're going to do. We don't actually communicate what the artist is going to do. Gives us more time. So we get the communications out of the way. And then the summer, or about 2 or 3 months, then we start organizing travel, accommodations, and then looking at like the schedule of the actual event, what people will do, what their needs are. But it's very... it doesn't all go forward at the same rhythm, because like I said, some artists know already what they're going to do. Some artists, 2 days before, they still don't know. So this is why I like this idea of like setting things in jello, like there's certain things and then everything else kind of
can move
around it a little bit. I'm also very comfortable coordinating chaos. Like I don't mind knowing what's going to happen, really.
That's super.
A strength, and this is something I try to bring in my team that I hire, that it's okay to not know everything. It's okay to have things moving around, it's okay to be alive. And the reason we don't start too early is because even if we do the programming, again, performance art is alive. So artists get sick and can't travel, artists have babies and can't travel, artists have visas refused and can't travel. Many things happen. So it's it moves up until really the festival, like the moment. But I would say it's a good, like, so we're slow. We move slowly too, and it's important to move slowly because we don't want to rush things, and we want to also let things happen a bit organically. And so, but I'd say the crunch time, like when it starts to get real, is usually spring until fall. So a season, like the spring, summer until the event in early fall. But again, this is hard to say because we are very much framed by grant timelines.
Yes, of course.
So it's also because until we have the money, I don't want to move too forward with promises.
Right.
That's why usually by the spring, we get a better sense of how much money we're going to have. And then we can start sort of unpacking things and getting into more concrete things. But because we have nothing and have to build everything each time, things do always move. Like even venues, like we don't know where we're going to be until about 6 months before we're going to be there. We don't know how many artists there's going to be until about 6 months before. So we move kind of towards something, and then you know, every time we can get a bit tighter, we do it. And then if we need to open up again, because we don't know, we open up. It's very organic. But I think this is the nice part of having done it for many years. Like I sometimes wonder if I've done it too much and I should sort of pass it to someone else eventually. But the nice thing is, having done it a lot, I build the confidence to just be comfortable with these kind of things.
Absolutely.
You know? So I'm like, someone is like, yeah, we had one artist this year. In the end, she had to desist, but we were in conversation for about 6 to 8 months. And I was like, don't worry. You make a decision when you can. You make a decision when you can. You know, like, I don't want to put pressure also. And these are things that as an artist, and because I have the experience, now I'm okay. But earlier when I was younger, these things made me very uncomfortable. And I was, you know, worried if the artist doesn't come, do we lose the funding, blah, blah, blah. But now I don't care. It's not that I don't care, but I'm more confident. And and I also believe in the importance of that flexibility and that time, you know.
That is amazing. That is a very amazing and value, and so much part of the practice and the spirit. And it really makes everybody more alert and you know, observant to others. And so it creates amazing atmospheres, I think. And I can see it in the pictures. Everybody is like so much enjoying, you know. It's really amazing.
It's a very joyous, and in French, like rassembleur, like it really brings people together. And I think in Canada there's a deep appreciation for it, because I don't think there's many art events in Canada. That's not a problem. There's also many performance art festivals, but I think ones that keep the artist there the whole time, that have this kind of casualness around it, this openness, this fluidity. In Montreal specifically, in Quebec is not very common, and I think people appreciate it because, again, part of witnessing performance is also being able to talk about it, to digest it, to be immersed in it. And every year, I don't know if this is good or bad, but there's always people who come and say to me, I hate performance, but I love VIVA. And it's interesting because I say, well, maybe you don't hate performance. Maybe you hate the way in which you encounter performance. And VIVA just maybe lets you encounter performance in a way that feels more organic or authentic. Or also because, like I said, like if people don't like what they see, they can leave and come back. It's free. And again, it's also not so much about liking or not liking the work. It's about being in presence with the artist and honoring the moment they are creating. And I think we have been able to cultivate that amongst our audiences in a way that I think is somewhat special. And I'm very grateful for that. Definitely. Because I think our audiences are generous, curious, attentive, grateful. And I mean, I don't know if I said this during the presentation, but I saw my first live performance at VIVA in 2006 as an adult. Wow. And I was just the first year audience member, and it blew my mind.
2006, sorry, 2006 is when Tari Ito was there, wasn't it?
Yes. And I have a distinct...
Oh, let's see. I don't know if you could...
There it is, yeah. It comes in and out of focus.
Anyway, it's the blurred thing in the background.
So and I have a distinct memory of her performance, like the giant inflatable breast, with like crushing people in the pool. And it blew my mind. It changed my life. And I said, I'm getting involved. And the following year I was a volunteer, and then on a committee. And then, in 2011, I got the job to coordinate it. And I just said, I want this to exist. I just need this to exist in my life, because it feeds me as an artist. You know, it gives me, I do the festival, not because I want a job and I want to be an organizer. I do the festival because seeing these works and these practices feed me in my work. And I do not see them being brought to Montreal. I do not see these practices being honored, being showcased. And so we can do that. And I do that for myself in some ways, in many ways, but for everyone else also.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well,
and I'm sorry that I did not I feel really bad for not naming all the artists in the programming, because we've really had like incredible people be part of it. I just did not have the time or the technical skill to go through and put everyone's name. But we are hoping in the next couple of years, because again, I don't think anyone ever thought it would last this long. And it's good, because if we had to think about it lasting this long, I don't think anyone would do it. I think I do it because I'm like, this is the last one. One more time.
Yeah, one more time. Yeah.
And it's built up. But I think one of the things we're looking forward to is maybe finding a way in the interim website. So now we have websites for each edition, but in January, it'll go into a website that sort of holds the archives.
All of it. Okay.
Yeah. And we're hoping
then the names will be there, because I noticed in Instagram also, the artist information is not, I mean, their names are not there.
No, they're in the text, but they're not in the image. And so I think what we're like, in the archives right now is that each edition website sits in another website. So if you want to see what happened in 2009, you go to the 2009 website and you can see like archive images there. But now there's so many editions that it's hard to navigate and get it. So I think one of the things we're actively looking towards off festival is to maybe work at a way online to make these archives more easily accessible. Yeah.
Wow, fantastic. That's amazing. Yeah, that's really, thank you so much, Michelle. It's so much more than I expected, and it's really incredible. You are doing an amazing job.
Thank you. Well, Graciela, I must say, I am very inspired by the places, people, and events I have gotten to witness internationally. So I myself have not actually participated in that many festivals, but I've participated in a lot of events. And I like the energy of events, like this idea. They tend to be more
it's amazing.
Pop up, and I think I've been very inspired by listening to people like you talk about performance, and people like Bartolomé Ferrando, and these people who we've had the privilege of connecting with in different ways, and for whom I think we have a lot to learn from in North America also. Like, I think we tend to do things a specific way here that sometimes is maybe not the best. And I want to just say that I think the values I bring to the table are not just mine. I think they feel like they're part of a network and a community. And it started with the So To Do Congress. You know, VIVA has always been, I think, very attentive to trying to learn from artists and listen to other people and organizers. And especially in the realm of self-dissemination and self-organizing. And so if I can bring a little bit of that to Canada and honor it, then I think I'm happy. But it's nothing we've invented. I think it's things that already exist there, and we're just hoping to pull it together and our space. So
yes. No, it's absolutely great. Oh yes, it's been so happy. I loved everything you told us, and the images are amazing. So you have word images. Is there like artists that are photographers that are, like focusing on performance, like the photographer in Toronto that we know, Chang.
Henry Chan.
Henry. Yes.
Yeah. It's very similar. So the first
growing also, right? That's him.
Yeah. So the first few years we worked with someone called Guy Leroux, who did a lot of performance documentation in Quebec, a lot of it. So all of these images in the pool are with him. And then when we changed locations, we changed photographers for Paul Couillard. No, that's wrong, Paul Litherland. And Paul Litherland is another artist who does a lot of photography of performance art. And then we've recently brought in a younger photographer, Manushka LaRouche, who we've worked with a lot too. So we definitely have like a small network of documenters. The documenters are, thank you for bringing it up, Graciela. The documenters are very much a very integral part of the family and performance art. So the photographers do come back. And it's because not everyone can document performance.
Absolutely.
Not just in terms of the quality of the image, but the presence during the event. It's important for us that, VIVA be first and foremost a live event. And so we really try to find our documenters who are modest and subtle,
Yes.
because we don't want someone standing in front of like, yeah. So if the artist wants it, then yes, the photographer can get closer and things, but we really talk to the documenters.
I mean, you know, you can maybe include that element, but
yes,
absolutely.
But for sure, we talk with the documenters and we say, if it's a choice between letting the audience see the action and getting a photo of the action, we let the audience see the action. That's not a, so again, this idea that loss is a part of the discipline and that's okay, you know, and again, that's why we have people writing about it and these other tools, because you can never see anything, but also it's very important for us, especially like in North America, people are very on their phones all the time and get uncomfortable and want to mediate it with the phone. And so I think to encourage people to just sit with that presence, we also want to respect that by letting them interact with the work as directly as possible. And so there are photographers that they're kind of subtle. And one of the reasons also, well, we've been working with Manushka for a number of years also, but the reason now is we actually have 2 photographers this year for the first time, because there's too many people for them to move around. And so now it's 2 perspectives, they can be more subtle. And so again, as things evolve, we try to change the way we do things to kind of better suit the needs of the artist. But at the end of the day, everything is about the artist and the needs of the work. So all the decisions, more than the needs of the festival, more than the needs of the public, more than the needs of the archive, the needs of the work are the starting point for decision making.
Wow. Super.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
Yes.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing, you know, all of this. It's great to see it and to hear you, you know, firsthand talking about all of this so clearly. And it really is amazing.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Graciela. And I mean, also for creating space for this kind of sharing. You know, I actually, the reason the PowerPoint's not names is I've never actually really done this before. And it was just actually such a wonderful exercise for myself to go through the archives and think about like, what is Viva? What can we share about Viva? So thank you for creating this space of reflection and sharing. I think it's so important. And I'm very grateful.
Very important.
Someone watches it and makes it to this part of the video. Then,
I know.
If artists have questions or curiosities, really do not be shy to reach out to me. The info at Montreal is literally just me. And I'm always curious to discover new work, discover new practices, open dialogues. Again, we're modest. We don't have, you know, billions of dollars or billions of capacities, but we have a lot of energy and curiosity. And so, yes, please feel free to reach out to me for collaborations, projects, to share your work, to share your practices. We're thirsty and curious and there. So,
fantastic. Super. Well, your contact information is also in the site. So, you know, and so whoever gets to this point listening, yes, they deserve it. Okay, thank you so much, Michelle. It's been an amazing pleasure. And we will meet again next Sunday with Mention It and then all of the artists that were selected in our festival.
Just before we leave, quickly, this is not related to this, but next week, is the time change going to cause an issue for next week also? Should I note a different time or it's?
We will now, and we were thinking because tomorrow we have also a conversation and John, we need to check with him. Because he's, So what would that be? It would be, you know, because we have Nick and Daisuke that are in the Far East, and it's quite late for them. 1 more hour would be a little bit,
I don't want to change the time. I just want to make sure I'm here at the right time.
Okay.
But
we keep that.
Your time will not change either. Your time is good. What time is it right now at we're in Argentina?
Right now is 1:01.
Okay. So I'm 11 a.m. right now, which means now we're
Okay.
2 hours apart. So I
Right,
will
okay.
note that for the Zoom that I will go
Super.
2 hours before the Argentina time.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
so I
yeah.
will be there at the right time with you next week.
9 a.m.
Yes,
Yeah,
9
so
a.m.
okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much again.
Yes.
Hug.
Enjoy the rest of the
See you next
programming of
Sunday.
enjoy the rest of the programming of the festival, and I'll see you next Sunday.
Oh,
Thank
yes,
you so much.
for sure.
Okay.